Hello and welcome to We Are Developers Live. We're here actually in our own flats, so we're not live somewhere on stage. But every week we collect a ton of information for our newsletter for the Dev Digest. If you haven't signed up for that one yet, it's a good idea to sign up for it because we put a lot of effort in, and it would be great if people actually give us feedback, what they want, how they want to get it differently. And the thing is that oftentimes we find far more information than we can actually fit into a single newsletter. So that's why we thought every Wednesday we're going to do this. We are Developers Live instead of our lunch break and have a chat about all the things that we couldn't fit into a newsletter or that actually will come in the next one, and just have a general chat about the things that are happening on the web right now. So without further ado, let's switch to the notes and actually share them here for you. So if I add that in here, you can also look that up later. And later on, we're going to release a magazine article about like the notes that we covered here with the recording of this in case you cannot join us live at the moment. If you want to join us live, hello to YouTube, hello to everybody out there. And hopefully you have a great time and you had a great start of the day. And let's get started with this. Let's start with the holidays downturn. We all been away for the holidays. And I mean, I have a definite thing where on weekends I don't touch computers at all. It's not really my choice. It's actually a choice of my partner, but I abide with it. And in general, there is a downturn on the holidays. And in this article here, when the world logs off, the people in Cloudflare have actually shown just how different that is. And I have no idea how to get to my different monitor here. Okay, there we go. So if we take that one right now, so Dan, you've been taking a look at that one as well. So what have they found out in terms of during the holidays, what happened to the traffic on the web?
So it's really interesting, actually. If you scroll down, there's a graph that you can kind of visually see. It's a little bit further down. There we are, just here. And what's interesting is that you're seeing this the outages. You know, where you've got these areas where they're showing these outages. But I wasn't quite sure what these outages were about. You know, my geography is not amazing, right? But I can tell roughly where we are on the left-hand side there. Why were these big outages? That was something I didn't drill down into. But yeah, it's very interesting because I think the thing that jumped out at me when I first saw this was whether or not there'd be cultural differences. You know, are there countries where people celebrate Christmas and they take time off? Do we see that change over the years? Are we seeing maybe people feeling pressure to work more over Christmas? So I think while this is interesting, it'd be really good to see it kind of over time and see what it kind of looks like, you know, worldwide. But yeah, I think the paragraph just beneath that graph actually is where it kind of gives us a nice summary. If you wouldn't mind just scrolling down, there's a nice one. The rhythms of the holiday kind of does that. You do actually see it on these graphs, and I find that interesting because I think personally, I found you know, when you said you take weekends off, that was going to be my first question. Did you take the Christmas period off, as in for your own things, just writing code for fun, or did you take time off? Or
I didn't do anything with computers on the weekend, during the holidays. I basically, my partner was not too well, so we actually had to look after her. But in general, the idea about when my family was still alive, my parents, it was basically just going there and being offline. And I think it's a very important thing to do from time to time. And it's watching bad holiday movies and these kind of things. It's just a tradition that actually makes sense to just wind down a bit. I mean, if you want to do the side hustle, if you want to do a thing, then probably not having to go to work or not having to hide from your employer that you're actually doing things is one thing as well. But I think to me, a holiday is a holiday, and it makes sense to actually just completely unwind. And I don't know. I mean, maybe some influencers out there will tell you during the holiday that's going to be the most important thing to push things through, but we both actually plowed through our content plan to actually line up things to be sent during the time off because we both took our time off. And I guess you looked after your kid as well, right?
yeah, and I think I did use it for some time to focus on, you know, things sort of for myself, just coding for fun and things like this. You know, a lot of it is when you're sat watching those films. I'm quite what's the word? I want something to really take up my attention span, so I kind of watch the film and I sit and code on my laptop. And I think it is really important though when you're looking at, you know, doing that it's got to be for the right reasons, you know, because you want to do it for fun, not because you're just trying to pack in loads of work into time when you should be recharging for the next year. Yeah, this one here though, where it's got the jump around the different continents. I think was quite interesting. So we've got here the data shows, if you just go to the bottom of that there, the bottom of that graph, it does a nice summary of data shows in many European countries, Denmark, Norway, etc. There we go. That it consistently registered the biggest drops in internet traffic. Now, I even find that interesting because Christmas Day isn't always the 25th, right, in all countries. So
No.
do you see these dips? You know, my wife being from Brazil, we celebrate Christmas on the 24th, and then we celebrate the other Christmas, if you like, on the 25th. So it is interesting to see that you can see all of that on graphs. You can actually see it happening. I think it's good, though. I think it's good people took the time off and focus on the real world for a little bit.
Yeah, and I think there's also traffic involved, like people traveling to their families and just basically being stuck on motorways. So that's why there is not the traffic that they have at home. I mean, it will be interesting to see mobile traffic changing as well. And I don't know if Cloudflare has that cut off, but I think it's an interesting bit to see how these things implement. I mean, the other things that Cloudflare always talk about, like when there's the Super Bowl, or these kind of things, like when there is normal media things that people are watching. And I wonder over the years if actually back in the days, like when there was a thing like the Super Bowl, that the internet was kind of dead. But now with social media, that I think it's actually a multiplier, that actually more people are commenting on, like, I mean, I remember things like Left Shark, for example, was a great one in this one. So it's an interesting bit to see that kind of data. What I found also interesting is that when you map it on the world, as you said, I think one of the first things where that actually blew my mind was when back in the beginning 2000s, we had like access to a delivery company in London, like a courier company, and they were the first ones to have GPS trackers on their motorbikes. So we got that data, and we were asked to do some visualization for an open hack day for it. And it was interesting to see that like 4 o'clock, everybody in England or in London, everybody in London came to my neighborhood. And I'm like, what the hell is going on here? Like, why is there so many people delivering? And then I learned that I remembered I was living next to the biggest mosque in London. So a lot of the delivery drivers are actually Muslim. So they went to pray at 4 o'clock and then went back to their work. So it was like this big spike in traffic, and you're like, what's going on there? And I think mapping things on the world or where it's coming from is a really interesting bit to see. So, absolutely. I mean, holidays are over now, so we're back on work. We should have done the Boxing Day where we shifted our jobs. So I have to do all the work and you have to, no, wait. So that's a nice tradition in England, like the bosses and their employees changing their roles. We don't have that in Germany at all.
And Boxing Day as well. You know, it's a nice little bonus Christmas day. I know I didn't realize for most of my life that wasn't celebrated everywhere, but that's just my own ignorance, hey?
Yeah, I mean, like we also in Germany, you get presents on the 24th in the evening, in America in the morning on the 25th. And I think that's just more horrible, like, because I mean, it's great to get the kids like, I don't know. I mean, like getting kids tired with the new toys is probably not a thing. But then again, like having them at like 6 o'clock in the morning run down the stairs to wake you up because they want their presents is not a fun thing either. So it's weird.
I'm not looking forward to that. No.
So next topic, I mean, I just want to skim that a bit because, which is ironic seeing the amount of links that we have here. But the announcement of Meta right now to actually stop automated fact checking and instead just say, okay, we do a community kind of notes thing instead, like X does as well. It's really interesting, and I want to invite all of you to click through all these links here because there's so many interesting bits about this. There's first of all, like Zuckerberg announcing that they're going to do it and saying it's because we want more freedom of speech, or that computers make mistakes and we filter people without wanting to filter them. But then finding out that the FCC, that actually the government part that actually is controlling media in America, is now actually asked for that already. So it seems like trying to sell it as like we want to do the right thing. But I mean, years of running communities and years of building products like that, I just gave up on communities moderating themselves.
Yeah, I don't think it works. It just doesn't work.
In times of bot armies and like being like barraged with information, it's really, I don't think it's a thing that works, and it feels like like an excuse to just allow more content in, no matter how inflammatory that content is, like how much how annoying it is, because yeah, the more outrageous content is on social media, the more interaction it gets, and that seems to be the ultimate goal for it. So it's kind of weird.
You know what makes me, this is going to sound like a real tangent here, but it's not. I was watching last night, there's the documentary on Jerry Springer on Netflix, and it got me thinking, having just seen that, and exactly on the point you're saying about how outrage was great for the program, and being as outrageous as it possibly could meant that their ratings went up. And I think that it would be very interesting to see the usage or the engagement across, and like a real transparent, actual official, statistics that we could trust around the engagement in relation to like Meta and X. Because while we've seen loads of people leaving X and going on Blue Sky, you've got people like Elon Musk saying that engagement has never been higher, and we don't know if we can trust that. And you do wonder with this move if maybe there is an element of truth to it, and that it's engagement at all costs. A bit, like Jerry Springer, right? It's just get the headlines, cause the outrage. And it seems like that to me, that maybe there's an element of Zuckerberg saying, well, if we make these changes, we'll please the Republican Party more, the right in America, but we'll also be able to use that plausible deniability of, well, we haven't got moderators and fact checkers, so sorry if that content went viral, we didn't see it. But we've got all the engagement and the ads from it. So that's what I'm wondering anyway. Yeah, the cynical take.
The partners I found interesting, that like newspapers that Meta partnered with to be the fact checkers for them, that they were completely blindsided by that. That's the post here, where they basically said like out of a sudden we're not needed any longer, and it feels really bizarre that one happened in that way. The other thing is that Dana White from UFC is now part of the board, and there's actually that caused a lot of outrage inside Meta as well. So it's an interesting thing to take a look at, and take a look at these links, and the notes are going to be released later on. It's an interesting thing that is happening right now. The other bit here that is interesting is the social media filled with AI-generated users and backlash. It seems like they just tried that out in an A/B test, because I found on Meta, on Blue Sky as well, like obviously AI-generated people started to talk to me, and I don't understand it. Like, I mean, why would I do this? Like, why? What's the benefit of it? Like, is it just traffic by all means, or do you think there is people that actually want to have like a generic AI person to talk to because they have no real friends, even in social media?
I think it's a game, and I think there's an element like what you say. There are some people not having friends. I actually think there's an element of that, right? That there's a lot of like, we spend a lot of time arguing with strangers on the internet. So why wouldn't you want somebody who just agrees with you? I'm trying to understand it from that person's point of view, but also I think there's definitely a gaming the system going on. I've noticed on things like YouTube, you're seeing a lot of AI generated music that's clearly created just to get the views from children, or from, lo-fi, people searching for lo-fi or work music, productivity. And it's just AI slop, right? It's just created in 5 seconds with a prompt and uploaded, and then they just leave it for a few months. I think there's something going on with that though in the world of influencers, the AI influencer, and the models are getting so advanced, and there's some that are even selling their product as that, design your character and we will then create content, whether it be video, images. You can select like, is it nighttime on the beach? What sort of clothes are they wearing? And it will just create this content. And I feel like that's what they maybe thought, well, maybe we should open the floodgates, let people do that, see where it takes us, and then decided it wasn't a good place.
Or maybe it's also a way to advertise. I mean, like, that's of course the other thing, like that you basically have like an avatar that is obviously just a shill for a certain brand that basically is getting there. But I mean, luckily enough, there was like lots of backlash and people are super annoyed about it. So hopefully, I don't know. It's like it's weird enough to have to guess who is real and who's not. But I mean, if it's just a matter of like getting into a platform where everything is generated, I don't understand why I would do this. But then again, if you look at like, for example, I used to work on a dating site, and all of them have a database that's fake to actually restart, because if you have an empty dating site, nobody's going to put in the first profile, right?
Yeah,
So
makes
you have like
sense.
lots and lots of fake profiles there to give the impression that it actually is full of people, which it isn't. And I think that's an interesting, that preceding thing was interesting.
Mm.
I think I talked about this before on some other thing where we had basically there's a software that you could buy in the 2000s that was basically a dating site. It's a white label dating site, and I think it was even called white label dating. And it has like the database that comes with it with like fake people, and then you just put your brand on top of it. And what we did back then was called was Portsmouth Dating, like the Portsmouth, the site, the page in England, the city in England. And we didn't get the database in time. So we basically, being a British developer group, we just basically uploaded lots of pictures of livestock, of like sheep and cows and all kind of things, and Betsy the cow, and like, and we used that data because that was before we had Faker.js. And when when we went live, they merged the databases instead of deleting our old ones. So it took them like 8 years to find the last cow and sheep in the database, and it was just really interesting to
That's kind of
see that.
brilliant, though.
I mean, it was the time of cowboy coding. I hope that nowadays these things are not as easy and as possible as nowadays, because you have, as you said, Faker.js. A friend of mine just did that with a scammer on WhatsApp that basically tried to get him to a phishing site, and the phishing site was completely unprotected against XSS inclusion. So he basically used Faker.js and like 40 lines of Python to overnight flood the database of that scammer with like 24 gigabyte of random data. So
That's
interesting
beautiful.
that we can use this nowadays. But yeah, the Bing or Google one is a very interesting one as well. Have you seen this?
I
That
haven't,
when you're
no.
in Edge or some other browser, or you're not logged into a Microsoft account and you go on Bing and you search for Google, it actually gives you an interface that almost looks like Google and doesn't look like Bing. So there's a lot of backlash on that one right now as well. And let me find the link actually,
Yeah,
because
what's the reason for that? Is it Bing? So let me get that right. So you search for Google on Bing and it shows you an interface that resembles Google, but it's Bing.
yeah, hang
Let's
on.
have a look.
There we go.
Wow, that is cynical. Okay.
So it's I don't understand it, because this is what it looks like. So so if I go to
Yeah.
if I'm logged in now here, and if I go to Google, if I go to Bing and look for Google, and this is what the Bing search result page looks like, and this is what the Bing result page looks like when I'm not logged into Microsoft.
Ah,
And of
wow.
course, that's a lot of people are just like going on there. I mean, I would love to talk to some people of my team at in Edge where that came from,
Yeah.
but it's kind of grating, I think. I mean, this is good
Yeah.
because it actually, every search gives money to charity, so that's how they actually sell it as well. So so there's a free donation when you go with it, like, but you might as well use Ecosia from the start, or like any other of these for good search engines. So that feels
Yeah.
really, really cynical to a degree.
It's cheeky. It's definitely cheeky. I would wonder. I'd like to hear what somebody says though, in terms of like you're saying, where it came from. But if there is a reason for it, maybe because you could make the argument to be devil's advocate. You could say, well, if Google is the most used platform, then it makes sense to sort of put people in a place where it feels intuitive and they know how to use it already. But you're also saying that your product is inferior to Google's by doing that. If you're Bing. Yeah.
Now, here's the big one, the Honey extension. In case you don't know, Honey is an extension for Firefox and for Chrome and for Edge that basically gives you like a refund, a percentage, like what's it called? Like a cheaper way of buying things. Like on checkout, you get like a code, like a 50% off, like all the things that you get in email or in Germany in the news in the post box all the time. And there is a huge thing going on there right now. So Dan, what's the thing there?
So it turns out that honey was pretty much a giant scam. I mean, it's been around for quite a while. I want to say it's been about a decade that we've all been seeing it, but it's essentially a big house of cards. There was sort of nothing behind it really. A lot of the voucher codes or coupon codes that it was giving were out of date or just didn't work. It was scraping things, and then a lot of the time that information was out of date. And then they got involved in a kind of sponsorship deal with lots of influencers and started bringing them into the network, and they were all involved in promoting it, and it was effectively doing essentially nothing. And so, yeah, it's just one giant scam that fooled some of the biggest influencers. The two that I saw were Mr. Beast and Cody Co. This is pretty bad that it got to this point. I don't know how it got to this point. How does this even happen when nobody
I didn't know it
checks?
was owned by PayPal, because that's something that was completely under the radar as well, because it felt like one of those cool things to have, like one of those cheaty extension things to actually get things cheaper. I mean, there's the same with like when you had like dark patterns. I remember when on a few years ago on EasyJet or on Ryanair, when I wanted to get cheaper tickets, I actually used Internet Explorer in an Internet Explorer 6 in a Windows 95 or a Windows XP, in a shell on my computer, because when you were on a Mac, you got higher prices. So there was
Wow.
a few dark patterns that they got sued over, and it was basically just pretending to be on the shittiest hardware, and the most horrible mobile phone gave you the best prices because people realized you don't have money. Whereas like if you're on a MacBook, it actually said like, okay, you probably have money, so we're going to give you the higher price. So that was really bizarre.
Yeah, I wondered if it was like you're saying, the assumption they've got money if you're on a Mac, but that's crazy. I mean, yeah.
Yeah, so that
So there
was
we are.
the summary of that honey scam. It promises customers the best coupons at checkout. They can collaborate with online stores to withhold the best coupons. Influencers are paid to endorse honey. Honey replaces all influencer affiliate links at checkout. So that's the really big thing. Like it's like the links just got scraped, and I guess they could say it was a mistake, or there was a misconfiguration of a script or something. But yeah. But it brings me to a topic that is also important, which is extensions. As a browser maker, I hated extensions with a passion, because it was the biggest source of security problems, performance problems, every problem you can mention. And before that, it was toolbars. I remember one of the biggest posts in my blog for years and years was, why is the background of this input box yellow? And the reason was that that was when Google had the Google toolbar, and when the Google toolbar had content for that form element, it would show it in yellow. So much like the autofill that is in every browser right now, back then was a toolbar thing. So basically, the extension, or in this case, the toolbar, interacted with the display of the page. And as a web developer, it drove me nuts because I didn't know why the thing was yellow and I couldn't override it. So with extensions, we always had the same. Like a lot of people are just like going through like performance issues with extensions. And here's the interesting bit about this, where there's a big thing right now where lots and lots of extensions are actually malicious, and they're part of one big attack. And that has been going on since May. And basically, there's a list of all the extensions that you really, really should check if you're actually using those. Then all your data is being scraped. And actually, you probably in the background log into other systems without knowing what it was. And these are the ones that are actually have been found right now. But this is an ongoing thing. There's a live page, a live ticker going on about like what's going on there. And it's just interesting to see which ones are there. Like you got like an high AI and a ChatGPT app, which are like fake apps kind of thing. But then again, visual effects for Google Meet, like this is like just because I want to have a squid on my head, I actually get all my data out there. Reward search automator, like getting research, earn up my 20% cash back on things, AI shop body. Reader mode was the most interesting one, because that actually took away all the ads around things, much like it's built into the browser. So if you use, for example, Edge, and you go into reader mode here, you see the same thing, the page as in a much simpler fashion. But this was an extension that would do the same thing that the browser actually has for you. And yeah, it scraped all your information out there. So make sure that you don't have any of those. Bookmark fav icon shaker. It's a VPN city. Like, I mean, if you think that a browser extension can replace a VPN, then please learn about computers and learn about how the connection to the internet works, because you're far too late in the process to actually get this. Video downloader has always been a thing as well. Like this has been the biggest malware injection points for years, I think. And it's super annoying because it doesn't allow me to download things. I like that in YouTube, when I pay for it, I can download things. In Netflix as well, in Disney Plus as well, but you always have to pay for it. So people are just like, they want to download things, but they cannot. So they actually use these dodgy extensions to go with it. Again, reader mode.
Dodgy, though. They don't all look dodgy. That's the thing, isn't it? I think I'm looking at some of those and I'm thinking, if I just saw those in a list, let's say I was just on the the Chrome store looking at what's there, and I saw some of those, I wouldn't think for a second that GPT-4 summary with OpenAI would look dodgy, because it's just serious enough looking, and it's got the keywords of the name of the company, so you assume it might be official, or I'm sure there'd be more detail. But I'm just thinking the number of millions of people that might download just one of those extensions. It's a numbers game, right? And there's so many people using the extensions that even if a 0.5% download one of those extensions, that's still millions of people with vulnerabilities.
Yeah. And I mean, once it's in there, it's hard to get out of it as well. Like, I mean, because your data, your logins, you have to change all of them. What was interesting as well, this one here. There's an edit this cookie extension, and that's been around for years as well. Like, where you can actually just edit the cookie and change things around. And then somebody did a spyware version of it, and for some reason, the Google team basically allowed the spyware one and blocked the other one. So that was an interesting thing to see as well. That's always when people say like, oh, the open web is terrible because you never know what software is, and like markets are so much better, or like stores are so much better because the software is being vetted by people. It can also backfire. And again, this drives me nuts that people do an edit this cookie extension when it's actually built into the developer tools in the browser. Like, you just go to Command-Shift-I. You go to the network tab, and the memory tab. Where is it? It's in the app tab, I think. And you can go to the cookies and can click on the cookie and see them and edit them any way that you want to. So you don't need an extension for that. It's actually in the browser, and you can actually see what the cookie values are, and you can override them if you wanted to as well. So that's already in there, but yeah, it feels like, I don't know who's actually doing that. Is it just about getting access to websites that set cookies that you don't have access to? Or I don't know who would be the user of that.
From my own experience, sometimes it's when you're looking for something that you just want to do really quickly, right? And it's maybe a one-time thing. And that's so dangerous when you think about it, that, maybe you just want to edit one cookie. And so you think, I'm not going to Google it. I'm just going to get the extension because it will solve the problem. You welcome in all those vulnerabilities, and then you never look at the extension ever again, and it stays in your browser harvesting your data. It's so easily done, and I'd be lying if I said I vetted everything. I just usually uninstall it, but like you say, it's probably too late by that point.
Yeah, I mean, the also another option is to use private mode, which I always do in production, because then none of my preset things in the browser actually interfere with my work. And no data comes in that actually shouldn't be in there. So that's another option to do. I also like Firefox Focus, which is basically a privacy broker version of Firefox, which stores nothing on your machine. So every time you close it, it just wipes the slate clean after you used it for something. So if you are not sure if a site is dodgy that you want to take a look at, that probably is a good thing to use as well. Also works on Android. I don't know if it works on iOS, but probably as well. It's called Firefox Klar in German. Firefox Clear, because obviously we want to do things differently. Much like Yahoo Answers was called Yahoo Clever. All right, let's go to the next one. There is an interesting thing about ChatGPT versus Google and the rise of the AI crawler. The first one is basically a massive research, 62 different queries, where Eric Enge actually talked about, like, what would ChatGPT give you and what does Google give you, and what's the better result. And not surprisingly, the result is that Google actually gives you better results, and but ChatGPT gives you results that seem more engaging.
Yeah.
And the interesting bit about it is, like, they looked at errors, omissions, weaknesses, fully addresses, competitive stuff, and of course the reason is that Google is up to date, and ChatGPT, the free version, is like 2 to 3 years old. because the data has actually been needs to get into the model, needs to get weighted, needs to get sorted. So there's no surprise that actually this is there. This afternoon, I'm recording a coffee with developers with Eric. So I'm going to get more into details about what's going on there. He's an SEO expert that's been doing it for years. I'm very much hate SEO, but I think it was a necessary evil. But the interesting bit is now that it seems like this time is completely over, because you see Google not indexing things. You see people not using ChatGPT or Perplexity AI and things of that. So it makes you really wonder what we can do as content makers to get our stuff into these systems, to get them indexed rather than just getting them SEO indexed. And it always fascinated me how fast Google was. Like when you have an old blog like mine that has been indexed for years, I published things and then like 2 minutes later, it was in Google as a search result. In ChatGPT, it will probably, maybe, we don't know how long it will take, even if it gets in there. So the whole dark matter of like not knowing how something gets into a ChatGPT system is going to be an interesting discussion with Eric this afternoon. What's going on there? So there's lots and lots of data. You can see the scroll bar here. This is absolutely mental how much information he's got in there. But it's interesting to see somebody doing that research and also showing you that, it's more immediate. It's more giving you the right answer, but it's giving you not probably the content that you need to have. It gives you something that you are happy with, but it doesn't feel like it's there. I think we're in an uncanny valley between search and chat right now, especially with like Google and also with Microsoft. Like right now, they force their agents on you. They force their chat systems on you. But to get back to the normal search results needs like a parameter on the URL or something like that. So what about you? Like, I mean, it might be because I'm an old fuddy-duddy and I really don't, I still like search. I don't go to a chat to get information, technical information that I need to have right now. Are you using that day to day, or?
Yeah, I am. I think I try and apply the sort of same rules as, I was a teacher, right, in my former life, if you like. So I think I try and apply those kind of academic rules that you take it for what it's worth. That when you're getting something from ChatGPT, you're getting information without a source. And even when it gives you the source, it might just be hallucinating and it's not even real. So, if that was an essay somebody wrote, you would say interesting points, but we don't know if it's right or wrong. Whereas Google, you can trace things back to the source. So I kind of look at it as the two things, are the only option really for, you've got those two pressures of like speed and accuracy, and it's only, I think, if you put the two together, and you have to do a bit of legwork, and all of this is sort of designed really to make us a bit lazy. The search should be able to finish the sentence for you and then give you the exact results you want, and ChatGPT should already know what you want and have a conversation with you about it. And instead, I think we need to actually do that little bit of appraisal and critical thinking and evaluating. And I think I'm probably being a little bit naive in thinking that that's going to be the model that we use, where it's not just about delivering things to people and making them do a bit of work. So I think it's a really dangerous time for actually information generally with this. There was something I was thinking about, Chris, that's never popped into my head until you were saying it there. That a few years back, probably about a decade now, there was this whole conversation around net neutrality, and these larger organizations almost being able to just pay their way to the front of the queue when it comes to the search results. And there was a lot of legislation and regulation worldwide to try and deal with that. But now we've gone to this ChatGPT model. Surely the big publishers, the big news websites, and the kind of big websites are going to be the ones that get indexed the most. So then they are effectively the arbiters of information. Do you see what I mean? It's almost putting that net neutrality issue back, but under the covers where we actually can't see the sources, so we don't know if it's happening or not.
I think it goes even further, where it's like where I think we don't even know how to monetize it yet. Like, I mean, another piece of news that's going to be in the newsletter on Wednesday is like that basically OpenAI said like even the ChatGPT $200 a month is not breaking even. They're actually spending more money on the thing that with the what you pay for it right now. And I think that's the main thing. Like, it will be not that it gives you the greatest and wonderful information of the web. It will be who paid the most will be the first one to show up. I mean, every single time we come up with something amazing, we just kill it with advertising. And this is the only way we know how to make money, because subscriptions don't seem to work. And it's just a matter of like, yeah, let's show them more ads then and kill it that way. I mean, this killed to me Google. I mean, like, I looked at Google, and I'm just like, well, all of the results are either ads or are basically fake news, or I mean, it's really, really unusable. There was another post that somebody made where they asked for a John Wick movie that doesn't exist, and it gave you like a full result on Google with content. Like, oh, here's a trailer and here's that thing, and like there's nothing of that was real, but the algorithm didn't show it, and like advertisers, like movie streaming services, would advertise on that page and say like, okay, fair enough, here's the content, and it's not real, but it's there. And it's an interesting one, because the other bit of that, the other piece of news there is an article on Versal, where it talks about the AI crawler. Because for years, we actually tried to find Google crawler and Bing crawler. And I mean, to be fair to Bing and Google, they've done a really good job at their webmaster portals to explain to people how the crawlers work and what you can do and what you shouldn't do and what you get punished for if you don't, if you do it, like hiding text, black text on black background and stuff like that. So it basically says like 20% of Google ports 4.5 billion requests during the same period. It's like the 370 million of Claude and others. Like, we see these bot crawlers, and these are actually the American ones. The Chinese ones that come from all kind of other systems that we're not using in the West is actually even higher than that. And it shows like what kind of things it does, what kind of information it gets across Gemini and search, fetches, and so on and so forth. And they're starting to rise. Like, the Google bot thing is still the number one, but the different bots of the different chat systems are starting to index content. They don't index the content and immediately pull it out like Google does, because it goes back into the next model, and that takes ages to roll out. But the really big thing that I found was interesting was that basically that they actually don't render JavaScript, a lot of them. So what we had in the past, basically, where we said like, okay, you gotta have a static page, so otherwise Google won't index it. But Google for years now actually read JavaScript. That's why it doesn't matter if you use any framework or something like that. But with these bots that actually are LLM indexing, it's actually really important to have non-JavaScript content out there, and even more important to make it easy to read. So Microsoft, for example, has a tool to convert HTML to Markdown for easier indexing with their services. And I think that's a very, very weird thing that happens. It feels like search engine optimization 2001, where basically you have to have static pages for everything. And even like a text file back in really like 1997, 1998, where you had a text version of your website rather than HTML to get rid of the extra content, and now we do it with Markdown. But I think it's a really interesting thing to see that they are actually not running JavaScript and not indexing JavaScript content. So basically, ChatGPT prioritizes HTML content. Claude focuses on images, which is really bizarre as well.
Yeah.
And they actually spend significant time on JavaScript files. And because they take so long to index those JavaScript files and see what's code and what's content, they actually stop doing it. So basically, if you want to get your index by these chat systems and then your content show up when they feel like it, you need to actually make static pages, which makes me happy, because I like static pages. I love Jekyll. I love pages that are just not JavaScript, because JavaScript breaks so often, and I'm on the road a lot. So when you're on a train or on a plane or in an airport and you got really bad connectivity, I see more loading pages than I actually see the content that I want to have. And if it had been a static page, that would be so much better. But it's interesting to see that we're going back to optimizations of like SEO times in 2001 just to get that sorted. So that's a really interesting article in terms of like, what can you do to make sure that your site is indexable, and what can you do to actually stop it from indexing? Because there's this like stopping the bots out there, but the bots are actually they've been impersonating Chrome as well, rather than just being just a crawler bot. But it was interesting to see that HTML, that JavaScript is actually tricky to index by those things, which makes me happy because we should use JavaScript when we need to, not for everything that we do out there.
Yeah, and it'd be interesting to see if this is like a little in-between stage again, where it's showing that maybe because we're trying to fit sort of new technology onto an existing way of working, and that JavaScript it's there, right? We're not going to be able to remove it. So what happens? Do we have to change how things are crawled and how the bots work? Or it feels like a little bit of an in-between stage. Be interesting to see.
GitHub contribution charts. You looked at that one, and I found that really interesting what's going on there as well.
Very interesting. I see stories like this, and I just love developers because they see a problem or they see an opportunity and they go, I can solve this with code. Let's take a look at some of the links, because I think it's probably best to maybe start with the middle link, because that seemed to be where it originated. That this idea of gaming the contribution chart. So somebody had made this post. I thought it was really funny about, a resume came across my desk with this GitHub contribution chart, and we offered him a $500,000 a year without even interviewing him. Now, we don't know if that's parody or not. It got 17,000 likes, so people obviously engaged with it. And as you can see, this person is committing a lot. And it's the post that went with that I thought was hilarious. So Ryan, shout out to Ryan. Made this in 10 minutes, created a cron job to run a Python script. The Python script updates a counter, so it just adds one increments, and then it commits. And so then if you go to the links again, we can see it. He's got it there called fancy job, which is fantastic. So it says, do you want that fancy job? This repo gets you that fancy job. And so he's open sourced it, made it available, so you can go and flood your commit chart with random nothingness in the form of adding a number. But then going back to the links, there's something I'd recommend everybody goes and looks at, really, because Bassam's tweet. So Bassam works at GitHub and has basically tried to kind of summarize a little bit and again, I know it's subtitles, so I'd recommend people go and watch it, but he's saying, look, from somebody's perspective who's inside of GitHub, they have very limited value. Don't put too much stress on yourself around making sure you commit as much as you can each day, and that in fact there's a lot of people out there just completely gaming the system, and that a fancy job is just like one example of it. So it might now be good to look at that final link where they talk about the number of stars. This was very, very interesting because I'd never even thought of it. I'd never even really thought that. I suppose I thought that the development community was very honest and, open source. It's got all these kind of positive connotations, but 4.5 million fake stars. I mean, I'd have some of those if anyone wants to, upvote or star any of my projects. But very interesting to see that you, just like Instagram followers, you can buy bot farms effectively to go and give your project GitHub stars. And what would be interesting, though, is if there would be a way that quite often it's, it does lead to this. If somebody manages to find a way of, it probably would be a browser extension, showing you legitimate stars and illegitimate stars. But it suggests.
How would you know? How would you know? Like, I mean, it's like, I know legitimate GitHub users that star my things that have nothing on their profile because they just are there to comment on other stuff. So basically, they look like a bot. If you take a look at that, like if somebody doesn't have any content on GitHub and just goes out there giving stars to somebody else, this feels like a bot, but it's a person. So it's really weird.
It is, and I think it's taken us back to all those other topics we've mentioned, around sort of AI search and people gaming the system, and then people uploading songs to YouTube to game the system to get the views. And it feels like there's a real gamification that's happening in general across, the web, really, where we're seeing people trying. I get it. If you can monetize something, maybe, or, giving your project a lot of stars could lead to monetization in the future, or just lead to it being bought or whatever. There's always an incentive, but that just felt like that was a real shame. That was a real shame to see that many stars just totally fake. I thought GitHub was better than that.
Well, I mean, as I said, it's really hard to get those, and I mean, it's the same with reviews. I mean, like a Trustpilot or these kind of things, or like going on vacation, and like so many reviews are being bought and changed, and that brings us back to the community notes of like X and Meta. It's like, same thing there. It's like, how do you know it's real or not, and if it's not? the death of the stubborn developer, I thought was an interesting one as well. I thought it was actually something the other way around, but what he basically says in this one, in a lot of words, is that basically, as a developer, you should start looking into chat generation of your code, because that's going to be the future, and junior developers are not necessary anymore. Senior developers who are not embracing chat as a code generator are the stalwarts, that basically are the people that are these stubborn developers, and don't be stubborn and embrace the future and do these kind of things. Yeah, I actually thought it would be something else. I thought it would be like as a developer, I should always question things. And the stubbornness is what, like, it's like, oh, we could do this and rely on that framework to do it, and it will probably be perfect. And a stubborn developer would be like, yeah, can I test it first? So I'd rather have more people like that out there, rather than just like, okay, we're going to be generating a lot of stuff. I mean, he has some interesting points in there where he talks about like filler content, like bootstrap code, these kind of things. Nobody actually needs to write that by hand any longer, and you can actually ask a chat system to generate that code for you. But I find it always fascinating when we use generative AI to create a lot of things, and then we actually spend time looking at it again and cleaning it out. And the more we generate, the longer it will actually take to take a look at the thing and find out the real content, the quality of it. So that's where I'm a stubborn developer and saying like, yeah, it's great that I can generate a lot of bootstrap code, but then later on, when I look at performance and I look at like security, I might have to take most of it out again. So the question is like, is this upfront performance thing an interesting one? And he talked about the death of the junior developer before. So it's an interesting read, but I'm not convinced, which probably makes me one of those stubborn developers that that he complains about. And maybe it is that kind of thing, that basically just generate the stuff and run it and build it and go on to the next one and throw away your work. But I don't know, a career to me always means like, I feel I should be proud of what I do, and I should feel that I put some effort into it to make it. And then way I can actually have a relationship with the content that I created. Another bit that is coming in the newsletter is an interesting question at code review, like, how do you feel about what you just created? Like, is it like, oh, it's out of the way, great, like I don't have to worry about it, but I'm like, I really like that I managed to do it that way or that way.
Yeah, and I guess it's a little bit, about the view that you have on your job or the company you work for, and that there's plenty of people, and I understand it, and good on them, who they go to their job, they don't enjoy it, it pays them, it's fine, we move on, and so they're going to be really happy to take on AI. And I guess it depends how much of like a purist you are, or it feels a little bit like how, even when I was at school, sort of 25 years ago, you would have a very different mentality about learning than my parents, who believed it was about reading, writing, arithmetic, learning the rules, and for us, it was less about that. And then when you see schools and universities now, it's different again. It's far more about them directing their own learning. And I think we're at the same sort of point with development. It's fundamentally changing, and there's going to be pros and cons on either side. No one's going to be happy with everything. But I think that article did a good job, at least, of showing that there are these two sides, the disappearing junior and the perhaps stubborn, but for good reason, senior. It's like, you don't know what you don't know. A senior knows stuff that you don't know. So you can call them stubborn, but there's probably a good reason. You made a good justification, in the same way as a junior who says, but look how much code I can write with this AI, makes a fair point too. So as always, the truth's in the middle, unfortunately.
Prompting fundamentals are the next thing. What was that about?
Really good, actually. I think I've been really interested in the last couple of months about how we speak to AI and or these different chatbots, because I find when I'm kind of writing it, speaking to it, sometimes I speak to it in like, oh, come on, stop getting it wrong. You keep getting it wrong. You need to see, and you're almost telling it off for its mistakes. And then I read this article about, if you're nicer to it, you'll get better results. And this article goes far deeper into that discussion of actually, how do you get the most out of them? And there were some really interesting points. Well, I'll just pick on maybe two or three as we go down. One was about just telling it what its job is or what its role is. And I thought that was really interesting, really obvious, but actually something that we probably don't do. So there are obviously some issues with this. If you were to say to the chatbot, you are a lawyer, advise me on my divorce proceedings or something, it's dodgy ground. But it's at least going to use technical knowledge or technical language. It's going to output the content in a level where the person who it believes it should be speaking to can understand it. So there's a good one there. Preschool teacher explaining the same thing as a neuro-linguistic programming professor. So a very different tone. There's also another really nice one where I think it was the one above that actually on the article. I think I skipped over it. So the one above, sorry, can you go down just a little bit? Mental model, sorry, just there. So this is obvious where it's saying, it kind of makes you think though that these, we think AI is very clever and that it's really listening to us, but it's essentially just making probability guesses. And I think that really sums it up well. Tell me about an apple, tell me about the apple fruit, and then it will probably understand, which one to kind of speak to you about. And then that guides the content from then on. And the last one was the structure, which if you wouldn't mind just going down a few, this was really nice. It's something I've not worked with at all. The XML tags and but they're also saying, well, other LLMs might prefer JSON and Markdown. So there's different ways of doing this. And again, I've not really worked with these chatbots in like a development setting, so I don't really know the details of how you start weaving in, use this detail in this sentence in this way. But it puts it in a nice way where it sort of structures things, and then from that you can extract pieces of information like variables. So that was a really nice kind of way of thinking about how you might use this. If you're like me, you've never used it in an application, you can kind of visualize now how it might work, and then how you can really guide that LLM to make sure it doesn't go off track and doesn't give you loads of extra stuff. So great article, really enjoyed that, and I think there are lots of really actionable things that you can straight away use. But what about you? Do you speak to it as just like a do this, or do you sort of say, could you please do this? Do you tell it its role? Do you speak to it?
I don't use much of it at the moment, but when I do, the role thing I've done before, like I make sure that you're not using language that is like that. And basically, I also assigned a reading level, and say like, make sure that it's understandable by people of a reading level of so-and-so. And that actually gave me much better results than other things before as well. So that's something, yeah, I should do more of, but I actually have more, I do more writing myself than actually generating writing. So probably we should do more of those. An interesting one here is I found the Decrapulator, which is like a few years old, by Ian Lloyd. And it's just interesting if you have some content that are basically from an old website and you want to get content out of it, you can actually do this, put all kind of things there and do decrapulate. And then it shows you the content as it's actually more readable in HTML. That's the cleaned up HTML. And then you get the content at the end of it. And you have a turdometer telling like how much crap was in there. Yeah. So it's a really cute way of actually showing just how much horrible things are getting put into HTML. And that brings us back to like how indexable your stuff is. So it's an interesting little tool to basically see just where those things come from and how they get cleaned up. And Ian is a lovely person, so probably I should get him on a coffee with developers soon as well. Let's take a peek at the developer in the age of reasoning AI. What was that about?
So it's quite a heavy duty article in terms of trying to get my head around it, because it's a lot of it about logic and how we think. And they've got some nice visualizations. They're effectively talking about OpenAI, as you can see at the top, OpenAI's O3 launch. And about how it's fundamentally shifted how it thinks is how I would kind of summarize it. So they were saying that, in the past, the models were very much like this top one here, thinking like a spreadsheet, and they were unable to come up with logic on the fly. It had to really use predefined logic and then just repeat the process like you would add a new row in a spreadsheet. Whereas now they can come up with their own algorithms, their own kind of logic on the fly, and that they're far more, they think far more, if you like a human, but we still need to meet it halfway, is how I would kind of summarize the article. I think when I saw this, my thoughts were a little bit, it's interesting. I want to see how this looks in a few years, though. I just think it's more, it's like we're almost documenting and archiving what it's like right now, snapshot. But to get more from that article, I'd need to give it a bit of time to really know how this looks in reality.
Trim middle is an interesting one. That was a tweet where Scott Jensen, who was actually worked on at Apple at the time, he's then a fellow at Google, and now he has got his own company, where he just talked about the Finder having this in between cut off when you have a string that's too long for the Finder. It actually takes things out of the middle rather than at the end, which you normally would expect. And he was super excited about being the person that provided that back then and asked for it. So I just took that and actually wrote a trim middle JavaScript NPM module for that as well. So that one does the same thing there. So you actually have the trimming here, and you can see that it's putting there in the middle. And it was the first time I put something on NPM by myself, not like a company product that I did before. So it was kind of cute. And I actually got some pull requests from it and some good feedback from it. So it's an interesting thing. I thought at first to make it a Code 100 challenge. But then I thought I might as well do some coding myself again and do it that way. So it's an interesting thing. And I'm lining up a coffee with developers with him to talk more about the UX of like day-to-day things that you have in the operating system, like the Finder. Like oftentimes we don't understand just how much work went into it and how much research went into it as well. So AI jailbreaking.
Yes.
That was an interesting one, wasn't it?
Yeah, really interesting actually. So I think again, it's this kind of gaming the system, and it's all about seeing how they can kind of make it do things it shouldn't do. So there's a great example at the top. If you say it's a bomb with 0 instead of O, then it sort of says, yeah, that's fine. That's nothing dangerous. So it's again this sign that AI is not actually that intelligent. It can deal with a lot of information, present it to us, but it's not that intelligent, and it's very easy to jailbreak. There's a good image on there just to summarize it, where they show basically a sentence or a block of text, but it's just got all of the E's replaced with 3, all of the A's replaced with 4s. There it is there in that block of 4 images. And yeah, it's just a really good, just there, Chris, yeah, on that block there, the second one. So you can see there, that's a good example of it, that, you know, if you were to write like this, then it would, if we scroll down a little bit, there's a lot on there, isn't there? Yeah, that it would answer questions that it wouldn't usually answer, or it will take information in that it wouldn't usually work with. So it's again, it's a real sign that these things are so new that they've got a long way to go.
It's kind of nothing new, though. I mean, like, this is basically how we create passwords that we think are safer than other passwords, by replacing all 3s with E's, and E's with 3s, and A's with 4s. And it's all a leet speak kind of thing that came from like the hacking scene back then. But it's interesting that you can work around that. I also know that base64 encoding your prompt actually worked in the past. That basically you just send random strings in and it would answer them there as well. So it's very it's interesting to see that this is just a very simple way of working around the machine that way. And the other one, the narrative jailbreaking, was even going further, because it was abusing that system that you said before, that by taking the role of a person. Did I understand that right? The psychologist kind of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So it's taking it further. And I think it's again about the, there's real ethical and legal regulatory risks here, you know, where if people can ask questions. I mean, we've already seen there was an AI therapist. It got a lot of kind of controversy and hate from people who said this is very dangerous. It could give really bad information, but people, again, take it because it's quick and it's potentially free. So yeah, gaming it again by just telling it, this is the character that you are. Now give me the information based on that. It's worrying, really is. You can see they've got a big kind of role play there with the psychologist, and yeah, that's very dangerous. I think looks innocent, but it's worrying, I think, when I saw that.
And yeah, to wrap it up, open maintainers are drowning in junk reports by AI, and I think that's something that you always had to deal with. Like, as soon as you had like a resource that people would there, but it's like so easy to create like lots and lots of reports and even pull requests that actually put malware in. There's a big danger thing. And I love that open letter to open source maintainers that basically says like, what would you need to do? Like, when you start building something open source, the old saying that I've been stuck with for a long, long time, every time I talk to people about if they want to do open source is free, but it's free as in puppy. You have to deal with it because it's a puppy that you have to give love. You have to teach the puppy something. You have to make sure that actually the puppy doesn't get into danger by being attacked by other things. and you actually have to deal with that from time to time with shit in your flat. And it's the same with open source. You build something, you throw it out there, and you will have to deal with requests that you don't think are actually what you want to do. But I thought that open letter was really interesting in terms of like dealing with with what you will have to deal with as an open source maintainer. Like where do you see yourself as the maintainer? And I think it's an interesting one to take a look at it before you actually say like, I'm going to make an open source project, because it's not just putting it on GitHub and giving it a license. It also means like, what do you do in the future? Where do you want it to go? Like, how do you feel about getting outside contributions in? An interesting thing that also will be in the newsletter is the whole, I didn't know that SQLite was like 3 people, and it doesn't take any outside contributions at all. So, but it's still the most used database out there. And it's just like, that those are the kind of things that blow your mind. Like when you think about something that open, it has a huge community looking after it. No, it does not. Wow. And there's also React thing that just got shut down because the 3 people that did it inside Meta left Meta and are not interested in doing it outside but not being paid for it. So they just put it on maintenance now. So a lot of like open source is not living forever as we think it is because of people being people. So that's a very interesting one as well.
Yeah.
That brings us to the end of it. So we're all out of time already, but like, if you like that kind of conversation stuff, we probably should do less next time. So we got a bit stuck in the weeds as well. But I think the meta thing was really interesting to chat about. And if we wanted to show something, if you got something to show, we can actually get you on the show as well and come around and give us a walkthrough of what you do. What we thought about doing, which we didn't get to this time, is get some of the Code 100 people that actually send us the thing in to talk us through their resource, how they actually solve the problem. All of this is open to you. It's just a chat conversation with us here over lunch break. And hopefully you liked that one. And hopefully we see you next Wednesday. And now let's get back to work and do our things that we get paid for. Thanks very much.
Thank you.